Representative Moulton. I know you're very focused on foreign affairs too, and you've been consistently critical of the Israeli government in terms of how they've handled the situation in Gaza. And you've lifted up the idea of the necessity to obey international human rights standards. However, as a Jewish American, a resident of Beverly, I'm very concerned about how the carnage continues. I believe that it is genocide, and I would implore you to call for a ceasefire, to call for an end to military aid to Israel, because I think if you do not take that strong stand, no matter how good your advice is, it's reaching deaf ears.
Well, first of all, I appreciate the question. I know that this is an incredibly contentious, divisive issue, not just in foreign policy circles, but right here at home. And I appreciate the opportunity to address it. You've characterized my position quite well, which I appreciate. Oftentimes these conversations start with a complete mischaracterization of how I see the conflict. But I think this is important for people to understand, what I do believe and where I stand on this. So let me explain that in answering your question. What happened on October 7th was absolutely horrific, and it can't be repeated. And to have a terrorist organization that's sitting at a nation's doorstep with written in its charter, written in its motto, the mission to destroy a state, does not allow that state to live in security. But it also does not allow the people who live under that terrorist organization to have safety or security either, or democratic rights. So my point is that everyone, whether you're the most ardent supporter of the Palestinians or the most ardent supporter of the state of Israel, everyone should agree we can't have Hamas here. Hamas has got to go. But my big concern is that although the Netanyahu government has said they want to eradicate Hamas, the reality is that they're actually arguably making it worse. And I speak from the experience of serving in Iraq, being a part of the 20-year war on terror, where we made a lot of the same mistakes. And it took a real strategy change for us, led by General Petraeus in 2007, to say, you can't kill your way out of this. There's not a military solution to this problem. You have to have a political endgame that both sides can believe and buy into. And every time you kill a civilian, that's not just a moral issue, it's a military problem, because you're actually inspiring more terrorists. And there's great data to support this, by the way. There's polling data from just before October 7th that showed that about 2/3 of the Palestinians in Gaza did not want Hamas. Now about 3/4 of them do. That's a real problem. If you're just an Israeli military strategist and that's all you care about, that's a real problem. Now, if we just had a unilateral ceasefire, we wouldn't have any sort of hostages back, and it wouldn't fundamentally solve this problem. So the reason I don't call for a unilateral ceasefire is because I don't think that's what we need. I think what we need is a change of strategy. And by the way, the people who are calling for a unilateral ceasefire are falling on deaf ears. No one's paying attention to that. But when I got together with several of the Iraq and Afghanistan veterans that I helped get elected a few years ago, and we wrote a letter to the president talking about the problems that I just laid out with Israel's strategy, we immediately got a whole crew from the Israeli embassy requesting to sit down with us. They brought in people from the IDF and everything else. So they actually are paying attention to that. And so the second reason that I don't just call for a ceasefire is because I do want to actually have the credibility to have the Israelis pay attention. They're not meeting with the ceasefire crowd. They came and sat down and spent 2 long meetings with us to talk about where we're going here or what we're advocating for. I can't tell you that we've changed our strategy. So I understand the criticism that, hey, this doesn't seem to be working. But I will tell you, at least they're listening. And it breaks my heart to see what's going on. It breaks my heart for the kids of Gaza who are losing their lives needlessly. And it breaks my heart for the children of Israel. You know, 5-year-old kids in Gaza are losing their lives today. They didn't do anything wrong. 5-year-old Israeli kids are growing up in a society that's going to send them to the same damn war because it's still going to be going on. We can't get our way out of this.
Wondering if you are hearing of the souls of the children in Gaza who are dying, and they're begging you to stop the murders and to provide health care, food, water, shelter for the people that are remaining, for the living. And I'm just wondering if you could listen harder and maybe fight a little bit stronger to have the ceasefire. I do understand your comments about it, that that's not exactly where you are. And I also did notice that you didn't mention the Palestinian community on the North Shore. When you started your talk, you mentioned the Jewish community, and
I didn't mention the Russian community either. There are a lot of communities that are
Ukrainian.
invested in this.
You
in
did.
Please
this
don't
situation.
compare Russians to Palestinians.
oh, I'm not. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't.
You know what? There are a lot of Russians who feel very passionately about this situation.
I
There are a
as
lot
a
of Russians
Ukrainian
who are
will
not,
stand for
you're
that.
implying that Russians are all bad people, and that's not the case. We have some wonderful Russian Americans here.
That's the truth.
I would also appreciate if you don't interrupt, thank you, because no one else is. Thank you.
Okay, sir.
So I wonder if you could listen more. You mentioned children, which obviously that's a top priority, and also to fight stronger.
Well, look, I'm not gonna fight for a ceasefire when I think it's the wrong policy. And I don't think it's gonna get the hostages home, and I don't think it's gonna end the war. But,
I don't know, the kids, listen to the deceased.
so I'm not gonna fight for that. But, if you were paying attention, if you were listening
I was.
to what I said earlier about
did.
both Jewish and Palestinian kids,
I did hear that.
I care a lot about them, and I think about them a lot. Next question.
11